Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother Asar Imhotep with the Madu Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture and the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. Today is Thursday, August the 12th, 2021, and we have a very, very special guest. And I know I say that with every guest, but this is a real, very, very special guest, someone who's been instrumental in my development, in my journey back to Africa, so to speak. And that is no other than Chief Oluwo Obafemi Fayemi from the O.I.D.S.I Institute. And we're going to talk about his new book. We'll probably talk about his old book as well, the Ifa tradition, Ifa in the Diaspora, and whatever comes to mind. So y'all sit back, and we'll be back in just a sec. And we are back. And I want to thank each and every one of you who are joining us live. And of course, those of you who are catching the archives. Um, Doing it a little early today, but we do this at all times of days, whenever we can. So I know many of you may be at work, and uh, others will catch us a little later, but either way it goes, it is a blessing, and I'm truly honored that you chose to spend your time here on this channel and to share in the conversation, in the dialogue with myself and my guest. And so before we get into today's program, a few announcements. Uh, First and foremost, I want to let y'all know that the book Muntu wa Nzambi, Portrait of Human as God's Special Creation by Dr. Shalima Lima Mukinge is out now. Well, technically, it'll be out on the 24th, but you can order the text, you can pre-order the text at maduandelapress.com. And so for those of you who are unaware, I have started a publishing company. And so this is the first book, not authored by me, that'll be published, that is published through my publishing company, maduandelapress.com. So the text is Muntu wa Nzambi, Portrait of Human as God's Special Creation, subtitled From African Creation Stories, Religious Beliefs, and Cultural Practices. And Dr. Mukinge is from the Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and of the Baluba people of Central Africa. So make sure that y'all pre-order your text at maduandelapress.com. And speaking of Madu Press, in October, I will be releasing this text, Chiluba Maweja, Yoruba Orisha, an Ancient Egyptian Ak, an exploratory etymological study. It will be the first text under the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology imprint, from Madu Press. And so we'll have more on that, on what this text is in detail, but just be on the lookout for when that will be available. And For those of you who speak Portuguese, I will be one of the featured presenters uh, at this particular online conference hosted by Dr. Uh, Katsushika Ribeiro. And so this is, primarily for those in Brazil, but it's going to be for those around the world. It will be primarily in Portuguese. The title of the conference is The Future, and I'm just translating from Portuguese. The Future is Ancestral, in search of the relationship between Kemet and Congo, and basically its impact among or with the diaspora. So there's a number of guests. Lepe Hoji Kala, of course, myself, Dr. Gabriel Fortes, and of course, Dr. Uh, Katusia Ribeiro. And so this will be on the 17th at the 19th hour. I think it's Rio de Janeiro time. So I'll have flyers out if you want more on what that is. I will send that to you. And my presentation is Kemet and the Congo, Two Traditions from a Common Ancestor. And last but not least, make sure that you join the Patreon page to support the program, as well as the upcoming documentary film that I'm doing titled Chiena Into. And we're talking about the relationship between the ancient Nile Valley and the central African Bantu speaking communities. And then, in part two, we're going to go into West Africa, starting in Nigeria, going into Ghana, and into as far as Sierra Leone, Senegambia, that area. So if you want to support that, our first trip is going to be in February to Egypt to start filming. So more on that at a later time. And I think that is it for all the announcements that I have. So I'm just going to get straight into it. And so, as I mentioned before, our guest is Chief Oluwo Obafemi Fayemi. And Chief Oluwo Obafemi Fayemi, Opega, the full name, is a world-renowned Babalawo and a founder of O.I.D.S.I, which it stands for the Obafemi Institute for the Divine and Universal Study of Ifa. He was initiated as a priest of Obatala in January 2004 and received his Tefa in February 2005 from the late Oluwo Dr. Ofalabi Opega at the Opega compound in Akure, Ondo State, Nigeria. He strongly believes that the restoration and preservation of African divine sciences and traditions can restore psychological balance and personal empowerment to all people. To know more about our guests, make sure that you visit obafemi.org. And so, without further ado, I welcome Baba Obafemi. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, brother. It's good to see you again, man.
It's good to see you as well. Good to see you as well. Well, first and foremost, Aboru, Aboye, Aboshishe, Baba, welcome to the program. And
I should add what you want. It's good to see you, man.
good to see you. For many who don't know, my journey, uh, some of y'all know, originally from Jacksonville, Florida, moved to Louisiana. That's where my family's primarily from. Then from there to Houston, Texas, to San Antonio, and back to Houston when I went to college. And when I went to college, I had a girlfriend at the time who uh, worked at a newspaper, and she was in a facility uh, with one of her clients, which happened to be who later became Baba Shango Dare. And we may, if some of y'all may know him from my blog talk radio days, but we should be having him on soon on this program. But it's through Baba Shango Dare. He wasn't Baba Shango Dare at the time, that I met Baba Obafemi, who wasn't Obafemi at the time.
No, not at the time.
So this is like 2000, 2001.
Yeah, about 20 years ago, man.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so there was a group called the Taseti African Historical Society.
Correct.
And there were a number of teachers and elders. And remember, so this is when I'm coming off of my Hebrew Israelite stint, you know what I'm saying, as a youth. So going to the university and, of course, taking Africana Studies courses, but this was more the community base. And so these are the individuals who would introduce me to individuals like Dr. Ben, Ashra Kwesi, you know, a number of scholars that were known, who were kind of prominent at the time for bringing information. And so the Taseti African Historical Society, from that to the Talking Drum, you know, study groups, and some of them being even held in my my apartment at the time.
Yeah.
And from there, some initiations happened with Baba Obafemi, and now the O.I.D.S.I, you know, is born sometime later. I'm kind of condensing everything, just kind of letting y'all know the time.
About right. It's about right.
So just letting y'all know that we go way back. And I've seen, to an extent, his journey from the moment that I met to where he is now. And he has grown tremendously in terms of his influence and impact on the lives of a lot of people, you know, just across the states, and I'm pretty sure across the world. And so it is an honor to have him. And I haven't seen him in about 10 years.
10 years, man.
I moved to Philly, and but so I'm glad that, you know, he is here now to share you know, his story and his wisdom, you know, with this particular audience. And so again, thank you, you know, for being here today. And
thank you for having me, man. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, you know, can you just tell us a little bit, you know, about who you are, where you're from, and, you know, how did you get to, let's go back to the point of Taseti, and then we'll go from there.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about Taseti, it was definitely my Taseti was definitely my it was probably the cornerstone of what was going to be built, you know, as we go forward. You know, I think the whole church thing was in another part of the neighborhood, so to speak. And Taseti, you know, after I come out of the church, you know, I'm familiar with the Nation of Islam, Black Hebrew Israelites. I'm looking at, ran across some 5% brothers, the New Wapian brothers, the Shrine of the Black Madonna. So it was all this that I was exposed to coming into the so-called conscious community. And Taseti was like that last hurdle, you know, because I met a lot of the brothers in the community. And because of what I was doing, how I became quickly involved in the community, you know, kind of started standing out, being known as Brother Steve. That point, going into Taseti, that's when all the academic, those other, you know, church, all the way up to the other groups that I named, began to really, really make sense. You know, one of the things we used to talk about was the ground floor of Waset. which is basically Nile Valley culture. You know, you're dealing a lot with Memphite theology, and a lot of that began to help me understand what really made sense in all these quote unquote religions, traditions, and things, and so on. But Thai City is monumental. Me and my God brothers, we often talk about some of the things that we learned. From time to time, I've shared some of the things I learned through Thai City, some of the material that I still have that I've never really shared with anyone. To look back at it, to look over it, and just see how it ties to Ifa, my life, and also just the goings on of the world today. How much it laid a foundation, not just Thai City, but the information Thai City brought to me about Nile Valley culture in the world that I'm watching live living color, you know, what's playing out today all the way through COVID. You know, it's crazy, but yes, it is. And, you know, that academic provided so much. So transitioning over to Ifa, the practicality, the ritual aspect, the ceremonies, it became, you know, intertwined and made more sense to me than most young practitioners of Ifa. I understood very quickly how to better reference the rituals, the terminology based upon what was given to me through Taseti.
Thank you. Thank you. And what was, you mentioned, it seems like you're hinting to the notion that, you know, you wanted, there was something in you that wanted more than simply what the academic analysis and studies of Africa, more specifically the Nile Valley, could bring. And what was that inside you that said, you know what, let me look in this direction in this small area of Nigeria to find what we call or to satiate what we call the greater hunger, you know, inside of you.
Yeah, that part. Spirituality, you know, understanding what it really was. And, you know, one of the things that we were given was to speak our own definition of what it was, spirituality. Learning the difference between religion and spirituality. Spirituality in its essence is about knowledge, awareness of self, elevating that whole quadrant of, you know, what is my purpose? How do I attain it? How do I maintain it? How do I expand on it? You know, the old saying, you can't be spiritual without doing ritual. It's in the word, it's by ritual. One of my first great teachers, Brother Shadrach Jabati Powell, taught us the linguistical meaning of the word spiritual or spirituality. So that made a lot of sense to me. And it got me to really looking at, you know, I got all this knowledge. Now, how do I practicalize it? You know, the day-to-day life of a Nubian 3, 4, 5,000 years ago down in Aswan. You know, what did that mean spiritually for that person? You know, you had a society, you had a way of life. You know, a lot of it was an agrarian society that the sacred sciences came through that. But here we are in this 20th century, this 21st century, you know, and you know, what are we really going to do with it in the midst of this amalgamation of cultures in this place called America? And for me, it seemed more that Ifa, as I coined it very early, Ifa became my tool. You know, the beauty of divination, to know, to forecast, to see, to help make better choices and decisions, to take away a lot of uncertainty, take away a lot of indecisiveness. When the divination says go right, but your desire to go left, and then you got spanked, you know, you get the lesson, and then you get a better understanding why you should have went right. I think that became a staple. I had an incident where my first exposure to divination actually saved, quote unquote, my job. And of course, later on, there was some things that I had to do for family, that the ritual, the divination provided, that Kemet at that time was not given. I'm not saying there's not rituals in Kemet. I'm not saying that there are not things there that to do, but I was not exposed to that at that time and period. So I take it as divine intervention for me to have a series of incidents to where, being a member of Tasseti African Historical Society, I was guided by an elder in Tasseti. You need to go see this person who practices Ifa. And I was like, what is Ifa? So by the time I got there, got to reading, got the work done, I said, this is what I'm looking for. This is the academic coming into the practicality. And so I felt as in that was a certain sense of being completed, or starting a path to where I can get something whole, as opposed to, here I am, this smart guy. I got all this, credibility, this academic. I've lectured, I've taught in my classes in Tasseti, but here I am still working for this old Billy Bob cracker. You know what I'm saying? Who got the IQ of a piece of furniture. I'm working for him because he's been privileged to give a position. And I'm thinking, how is Patah going to help me in this situation right now? Well, I'm sure there's some ways that it could, but I wasn't privy to it. So Spirit brought me to Ifa, and when I was exposed to it, because I've never gotten to the point to where I told people leave Kemet alone. Kemet is the groundwork for the world. They're still digging. And so there's got to be something to it. But for me, Ifa, it's almost like you took the knowledge of Kemet, as a good friend of mine said, the juju went west. And so when I say the academic came into contact with the practicality, for me, it became a great tool. Beautiful tool.
Indeed, indeed. So how did you come into contact with the late Dr. Opega? And who is Dr. Opega, and why is he important for us to know outside of his relationship with you personally?
It's funny you should ask, because I think this last maybe 8 weeks, I'd probably say most of the summer, he's been showing up a lot in thought. But the interesting thing, when I speak about coming into contact with Ifa, my first contact with Ifa had nothing to do with Baba Opega. I think my first year and a half, 2 years of Ifa was probably there to be introduced to Ifa, but also to find what it is not. And this particular Babalawo that helped me out in my situation, I did not, he was a very, powerful brother, but lacked a lot of personality, wasn't very kind, very egotistical, very arrogant, which was way away from my character. And, I stopped going over to, study and listen over at his temple. But that was a particular couple that I had developed a friendship with. They were never allowed to read anything he didn't approve of. And so, not being a member, not being initiated, I could read anything I want. And so we were discussing a particular book written by the late Afolabi Opega, which was called The Sacred Ifa Oracle. Not understanding very much, because I'm not a practitioner, I'm not initiated, and of course I'm not doing any divination, but she was explaining to me that's a great book as well. We were talking about Ifa one day, me, her, and her husband. And so I stopped going to the temple, but she reached out to me probably about a year later, or close to a year later, and told me the guy that wrote the book that we talked about was in town. I contacted a friend who I knew had a connection with Baba Opega, and he said, yeah, Baba's here right now, but he's leaving tomorrow. And I was like, wow. So he did say, Baba, this is the guy I was telling you about, wanted to meet you. Baba Opega told me to come over. He would meet me now. I left work. This was a Tuesday evening back in 2003, in the springtime, I believe it was. And I came over, Bob and I, we did a reading. I mean, amazing. He just broke everything down from the start. That was from about 7 p.m. to about 7:45. I didn't leave him till almost 11:30 at night. And that was because he wouldn't let me go because he said, what is your question? What is your question? Anybody knows me, you can never ask me, what's your question? If I feel as though you're holding knowledge and information, I'll keep you there the whole time. That was the beginning of a beautiful relationship. We talked on several occasions afterwards. I was amazed about his journey as a Nigerian in America. He was very well educated. He worked for worked for Shell Oil for 20 years. He was very well invested with businesses back in Nigeria. Very well educated. He was married, had children, and he had wrote a book. He had wrote 3 books, as a matter of fact. When I went through my January 2004, I went through O.I.D.S.I, an amazing experience. Not much happened with bells and whistles and levitating, but that was a shift. He told me I needed to become a priest of Ifa within a year's time. In a year's time, I did. I went to Nigeria in February 2005 and became this priest. That is when I was really exposed to who this brother was. His book speaks of 5 generations of being an Oluwo. His father, Olarimiwa, his grandfather, Onadeli. The Sacred Ifa Oracle belonged to Onadeli. Baba just took his notes and translated them into English. That is very, very interesting because when I went through my initiation, he was giving me a history of the tools that he had. One in particular, the Osu staff of a Babalawo. He told me at the time in 2005, it was 960 years old. That was the bloodline that he remembered. And the power was in their herbs and their divination. The priest of my organization, one of the things that if you don't learn anything else, as a priest, you must learn divination. It's in the Opega bloodline. They were masters of divination. The way they divine is different than some practitioners of today. One particular elder told me the Opega definition was older. It came more so from almost like an Eastern tradition. There's a pyramid that's tied to the way the divination works. Another elder told me the way we're divining was before the way they divine now, that they call the upper chamber. So we were very, very pleased I was very, very pleased to understand this. I didn't even know this till Baba had transitioned. He transitioned in this particular time, 2006, almost 15 years ago to this particular day, this particular month. And the impact that he left upon me in the 2 years that I worked with him, got to know him, I definitely fell in love with him, his personality. He was the teacher I needed. Based on where I came from, out of the church through Taseti, that could not have been any other Oluwo or Babalawo that I have went through. If I did go through anything else personally for myself, my personality and my character, I would have probably ended up right back in church, meaning my institute would probably be more of a Ifa church, because I felt as though I had to escape organized religion. I can't do certain things totally entitled under rules and regulations. So even now, the tradition of Ifa, Sheshe, I make it very, very clear. I don't practice that 100% because I'm not Yoruba. Those were the first words of my Oluwo. He made me understand very well, you're not Yoruba. You'll never be Yoruba. You are an African in America. And there are things that you need. And I asked him, well, Baba, what do I need? He said, you need to know. The knowledge of who and what we are, not as a person, but as a people. We need to know our journey. So I have no reason to, quote unquote, totally emulate and the Yoruba culture. That's a people. Ifa is a practice. And I think that's where a lot of us get very disheveled about, because we say, well, I'll never learn this, I'll never learn that. You're not here to learn everything about that. That's a cultural thing. There's a reason why your ancestors choose for you to stay in the bloodline of those who came through enslavement or who are already here, as opposed to the bloodline you was separated from in Nigeria and not born there, practicing it from a Yoruba perspective. And those were the things that he taught me. That's who he was. That he made it very, very clear. And from what he laid the groundwork for, similar to what Tassetti had given me, became a beautiful, beautiful mix. And to me, that is the best way I can describe him. A very jolly person, happy person. He was like this little black Buddha, always smiling. I only seen him upset on one occasion, rightfully so. Not very temperamental, but that was stories where he took care of business. And, you know, I like to hear that because it became a very delicate balance. But the one thing that he always made it very clear, and the thing that I try to pass on that most people don't get, Ifa is supposed to be fun.
Hmm.
And the one thing you can't get out of some of these colonized Negroes is church. And they can't take the fun, the beauty, the wisdom, the poetic romance and dance of nature. They just can't seem to enjoy it. It always have to be some quote unquote stuff. And I laugh about it. I never really address it. You know, I'm not on social media to go back and forth with those types of opinions. But I just think it's very, very sad that we cannot take a very simple concept of a natural order and turn it into a church. We just seem to be masters at that and not being able to step aside the pettiness and just really enjoy life. Ashe.
Indeed, indeed. I've only met Dr. Opega twice, and very briefly and in passing. So the first time I met him, it was through you. I don't even know if you remember this, but you were having a meeting with him at the place that was called Mocha Life,
Yeah.
cafe. And
Oh
so,
wow. Yeah. Was that over on Blodgett or I mean Alameda?
Almeida, yeah,
Alameda, yeah.
Almeida in Houston, Texas. For those who don't know, so that's what, because I didn't know nothing about none of that. So you had introduced, yeah, this is, you know, Dr. Opega and da 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 da. And y'all was like, all right, hey, how you doing? And y'all went and had y'all meeting. I was doing something else. I don't know what I was doing.
Right,
But,
right.
and I forgot the nature the second time I met him. But you know, it was only then that I kind of figured out, like, you know, who he was in regards to you know, in terms of his works and things of that nature, and the whole Ifa system. So, you know, like you introduced the Kemet, you know, I think Kemet's the gateway or the doorway into Africa for a lot of us.
Absolutely.
And then we kind of find our own way for those who decide to mature past Kemet. But you brought up something that, you know, in regards to Kemet, to where, you know, I find that I have this discussion with just various folks who would say the same thing about, of course, they don't know necessarily all the details about a tradition or a wisdom tradition like Ifa, but how is Ifa practical in this space, you know, over here in America, and, you know, with that old religious, you know, voodoo that y'all doing over there, you know what I'm saying, from Nigeria? Like what, like, how has it impact your life in the sense that uh you found it very practical to be able, and very practical and able to integrate into this present time and space here in the diaspora? And I know you mentioned kind of a little bit earlier in terms of uh Dr. Opega saying that, you know, you're not Yoruba, you're an African in America, and, you know, of course, you're not going to learn everything or do everything in the same way that Yoruba people do. And so, with that said, you know, well, I guess it's a two-part question. So, how is, you know, for you, how was it practical? And then what would you say to those who are like, well, you're not practicing Ifa if it is not done exactly the way that it is done in their region of Nigeria in which they're familiar with? So, two-part question.
Okay. So if you're asking, you know, how is it practical for me?
Yeah.
Right. You know, first of all, how it becomes practical for anybody is that you have to tap into its wisdom. You have to tap into the wisdom of nature. Nature and the wisdom of nature is not limited to the Southwest Nigerian region. Their story, their mythology, their creation story, that God created the world in a city called Ile-Ife. They also believe the first white man showed up in Ile-Ife. But that's their story. That's they're allowed for that story. You know, I respect that. I don't have to believe that, but that's their story. And that is part of my understanding. I need to understand that, you know, from their cultural perspective, because I feel as though to really be practical, you also have to find the holes or the flaws in anything in order to know it in its totality. For me, I understand very clearly I'm not Yoruba. The Yoruba people, predominantly in this day and time, are Christian. Ifa is not limited to the Yoruba people. Ifa, the wisdom of nature, the natural order of things, universal truth, that occurs all over this planet. The expression of the Yoruba people and how it found its way into the diaspora is the beauty. That's the beauty. And when it goes into Brazil and it finds its way under many names and the one banner of Candomblé, you know, it has the tree. Branches are going in different ways. What the Africans did alongside the Portuguese and the native people is a beautiful thing. If you go further up, you hear names of Angola, Umbanda, Quimbanda, enchantment, all these names that are, you know, related up under Ifa. But to claim Ifa is yours, there's a debate, because it's the wisdom of nature. Saying the wisdom of nature and how to understand the wisdom of nature is simply belong to this one people. Nature is an ever-growing, ever-expanding thing. Even as we speak, we're seeing heat, we're seeing climate change, we're seeing floods. You know, this is nature. This is the natural order. We can associate that to every orisha or every force in nature and what they're trying to say. And so the practical part for me is you have to tap into its wisdom. And I can't tap into its wisdom if all I'm going to focus on is one group of people in one part of the world. I'm doing myself a disservice. Now, don't get me wrong. I love what they have brought. I'm born out of what they brought. But as any child that leaves a parent, I expect the parent, the expectation of the parents for the child to grow. A good parent would like to see the child grow further than them. I know Baba Opega wanted me and my god brothers and a few of my god sisters to grow beyond him. He said he wanted to see the gap between science and religion. He wanted to deal with that of science and religion. What me and my specifically my god brother Baba Shango Dara has done, we have been working on that for 20 years. And so what I say to those individuals who say you're not practicing Ifa, you're not practicing the tradition, I don't have to practice the tradition to be a practitioner of Ifa. I don't have to practice the cultural expression of the Yoruba people. The Yoruba people are the Yoruba people. I'm born in Third Ward, raised up in South Park, Houston, Texas. You know, I'm from the trade. You know, I grew up in segregation. You know, I watched integration come. I remember when Dr. King got shot. I'm not sitting here trying to convince anybody to be like me. I do what I do, and I teach how I teach. I learn how I learn. And I'm not going to teach and learn something that is uncomfortable to my personality, my character, and most importantly, to my journey. I do believe Ifa is my tool, Ifa is my journey. But to try and emulate a tradition from the Yoruba people that's millennials of years old, I just don't believe it's going to suit some of us the best way in the 21st century.
There's a proverb by the Idu people in Central Africa. It says, "A child who has never left home says my mother is the best cook." And something that you just said in your last statement reminded me of that proverb. And so there's uh, an individual who I correspond with, um, who he's initiated in several systems in Africa. He's from uh, Southwest Africa, excuse me, Southeast Africa in Malawi. And he has coined this term, the African superhighway of wisdom. And he was told along his journey that uh, essentially from all of his elders that to speak in your name, never in mine, and to digest and internalize the teachings, but to always speak with the voices, you know what I'm saying, of your destiny and your ancestors. And so, you know, one of the beautiful things about the African spiritual traditions, which we've renamed here on this channel, we call it Kimoyo. Um, the art of vitality and dynamism after the Congo tradition, um, and that, you know, inherent in the systems is the ability to learn from other systems, the expectations that you would learn, you know, basically how to learn, you know, from others. So that there's always that. There's another proverb that says, you know, wisdom is a flower in the garden of one's neighbor. You know,
Yes.
uh, you mean, and uh, you have to be, you know, you have to travel. In other words, and have,
You know, you bring up, you know, it's definitely a valid point when you speak about the first proverb. You know, if you never left your home, your mother is the best cook.
yeah.
I used to say, you know, I tell people, I said, when you say your mom makes the best peach cobbler, you know, you haven't tried my grandmother's. You know, you haven't tried anyone else's. So how would you know? Traveling, the one thing that I've come to believe in, something I was told early on in E5, probably within my first 5 years, I kept seeing it. I would read about it. I would hear about it. Is that Orumala, which is the spirit of destiny, wants you to travel. It wants you to see things. You know, having been blessed to go to places, East Africa and West Africa, I've been into the Mediterranean, Europe. I've been into Australia. You know, one of my highlights of life is to be out in the outback with a group of Aborigines, and I'm looking at all this their traditional systems and how it's so similar to Ifa, how it's so similar to Kemet, how so it's similar to when I was down in the jungles of Guatemala, looking at and walking with the shaman and listening to the Mayan stories,
Mm-hmm.
the collective consciousness when one first seeks the wisdom of nature, that you find as you go around this world, indigenous people or people who practice indigenous concepts are often in a almost in a better state of mental health
Mm-hmm.
to a degree. And that's very important to understand. And I say that because one of the things that we don't often look for in these systems is how to elevate ourselves. And the easiest, most fundamental way to elevate yourself is you got to move. You got to travel.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there was a study I saw some years ago. It gave this it's like 90% of all African Americans who leave America to travel go to the Caribbean, Jamaica. And for all the African Americans who travel within the continental U.S., they go to places like New Orleans, Atlantic City, Florida. You know, they'll go to places, you know, that are pretty much the same. What was surprising is how very few African Americans go into areas that hold our history, uh,
Mm-hmm.
remnants of of high cultural aspects. And with a system like Ifa, it's like saying the best I'm going to be as a Christian is to go to the Holy Land. My best op as a Catholic is to go to the Vatican City. If I really want to be a devout Muslim, I need to go to Mecca. Or if I'm going to be a Buddhist, I need to go to Nepal. People say, well, I need to go to Nigeria. Well, if we look around, a lot of what we're looking for in Nigeria went out into Brazil. It went into the Caribbean, went into Central America, places like Cuba. But then there's the collective consciousness that's all over the world. If you go into Southeast Asia, as some my brothers and sisters have, they come back with the stories. We lost a great elder brother, Renoko Rashidi, that would expose a lot of that. It's how you see your world. Sometimes you have to see the world. And even though you may not be able to go to all places in your lifetime, imagine what you can learn going to a few places that's out of your quote unquote comfort zone. So it's true what you said about, in regards to the first proverb. And so when I go to Australia and I'm doing a reading and people get on the mat and they want to know about their marriage, they want to know about their family, they want to know about their health, where's their fortune? It's no different than any other place I go to on this planet and do a reading for someone. And, to say, well, you can only get a reading over here. To me, I think we're not being careful. We're sort of becoming our own co-conspirator of recolonizing ourselves a different way. And I think that's the thing that's doing us a great injustice. And we're sort of kind of getting back into religion through a tradition and not staying open to the changes. If Ifa was supposed to stay what it was all along with a cultural perspective of a people, then it would have been just that everywhere it went. And I think because we're a young practitioners to it, not as old as Cuba and Brazil and these other places, I think once we get past the religious aspect of it and the cultural influence from one particular side, I think we'll be able to grow. In the opening statement, you read something from my page to help heal us from our psychological ills and things of that nature. I still believe nature has a way of helping us see our true selves and what's really going on in our lives.
Indeed. For those of you who are just joining us, my guest today is Chief Oluwo Obafemi Fayemi, Opega. And make sure that each and every one of you who are listening live or even listening in the archive that is right, subscribe, and what? That is right. Hit the like button. So we want to be very disrespectful to the YouTube algorithm and make sure that we interrupt the normal foolishness with some of this great African wisdom. So we can only do that with your help by clicking the like and sharing the video. And so continuing, I want to get on your two books before we go. So before we get to your latest text, can you tell us about the first book and what it's about and what was the inspiration behind it?
Are you speaking of Who is Sambo?
Who is Sambo?
Let me tell you, a lot of people don't know. I followed the Clinton family leave back. I was back when I was working corporate America, and I was coming into a lot of knowledge. Like a lot of us do. We come in, we're seeing John Henry Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, a lot of our noted elders, Black historians. And coming into a lot of that knowledge, I came up with the inspiration to write a book. And I had tore my Achilles heel playing in a company basketball tournament. So I was out. So I took the 90 days being out of work, and I wrote a book. And the book is based upon 7 African Americans from the same background, but have taken basically 7 different paths in life. And their personalities, their characteristics are all coming together where they're thrown back from the year 1999 to the year 1831. They're thrown back into time and they're put on a plantation. They're actually in the same spot of their home city, but they just went back 168 years, and they have to, despite their differences, their different approaches to life, their different backgrounds, what have you, professional people, artists, Pan-African person, a minister, all of these people who have these differences in this modern day have to come together collectively to find a way back home, and they have 7 days to do it. And Sambo, the name, when we look at the novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe, Uncle Tom's Cabin, the term Uncle Tom has often been a misnomer. It's my pet peeve. Black folks don't read. Uncle Tom, that we have characterized as the brother who sells out, actually, if you read the book, Uncle Tom never sold out. He actually loved his people to the degree he was a smart brother. And the infamous master Simon Legree decided to put him in charge whenever he would leave the plantation over the slaves. Well, this really rubbed this other particular slave, who was a brute. I mean, he hated all black folks, and he was black, and his name was Sambo. And when Simon left town, he would put Tom in charge, and Sambo would get upset, waging a war against, black folks is an age-old strategy. There's one particular time that was a slave ran away. They caught the slave, brought her back, and Tom was asked to whip her. Tom decided not to whip her. And because of that, Simon was very upset. So he in told asked Sambo to punish Tom. And so with glorification, Sambo pretty much was beating Tom to death. But in that beating to death, Tom was still saying how much he loved his people. He would never have beaten his woman. He understood that Sambo didn't know what he was doing. And in the midst of that, Sambo got touched and realized, that's sort of part of the climatic of the story, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. So the question was, who is Sambo? Who is today's modern day Sambo? Who is this person that works against his people? Who is this person that is perpetuating, defaming a community, our institutions, people who sell out, people who equate success with having different people that don't look like as your mate as you get your success. It just brings in on that all the way down to hair, religion. It just covers a few topics. That was my book, Who is Sambo, which is just more so an intimate look at ourselves as a people. A lot of self-hate tied to that, which I thought was cleverly written. I must say so myself. It was actually a 6-minute short film done about it that was also presented at a film festival back in Atlanta back in early 2000, I believe. There's a film festival that it was presented in, and scared a lot of people. So I was like, Ashe. Yeah.
Indeed. And they can get that book on Obafemi.
Yeah, you can go to my website. The book is, there's been a rendition of the book. It's a whole new copy of the book. It's been dolled up, fixed up, different cover and everything. You're definitely welcome to go to the website. You can order it from the website. It's available.
All righty. And next, and I guess this would be more so geared towards those who are practitioners of the tradition, but you recently relatively released a text, Understanding the Fundamentals of Odu.
Correct.
Present day expanded definition and alternatives to working the first 16 Odu. So can you tell us a little bit about that text and why you felt the need to write that particular text?
Well, that's a nice. You should really buy the book. It's a nice section on. I actually titled it "Why I Wrote the Book," but in short, it's a workbook. is not just a book; it's an actual workbook. It's the cover in itself. Odu is actually the oracles that when you get a reading, the oracles that fall that we interpret are called Odu. Odu is feminine. So this is the first time any African American, to my knowledge, as I've been told, that someone would put on a cover or even put as far as a picture to where it's an actual woman. And even if you see this brown, this is where there's an actual face in there of a woman, which fits on, that's a divining trait. The book is to help us understand there's 256 oracles. The first 16 are the major, or what we call the Medjis, the 16 children of Orunmila. After they intertwine with each other, it creates another 240, which gives us a total of 256. So if you know the first 16, you know how they look, how they move, how they operate, then you can get more into the remaining 240, which I'll be writing about hopefully soon. The fundamentals are just that. It's very fundamental. It's not anything to where it's so esoterical. Why did the frog go on a date with the elephant? It's not anything like that. It's just basically telling you the thumbs up side of it, the thumbs down, the light side of it, the dark side of each oracle. Any base practitioner, you don't have to be a priest. You can be a base practitioner, even if you are not a practitioner of Ifa, but you do divination with Obi or Kola Nut. It can still provide a lot of information for you. So it's very fundamental. There are rituals that come with it, nothing involving blood and heinous stuff. It's mostly things of meditation, plants, crystals, prayers, places to go, things to do, things not to do. It's more so about killing the chicken in you as opposed to sacrificing one. The alternative ways are just that. It's finding alternative ways. We're a growing society of veganism and plant-based and save the whale. And so we basically are not, I'm not taking away from the traditional ways, but this is more so adding to, an alternative way for those people who may not feel comfortable in practicing certain things traditionally. And of course, I try to home in on the way we learn as Westerners, as opposed to other cultural ways of expressing themselves. I understand it very well, but there's a lot of people over these, 15, 16 plus years as a priest that have a very difficult time understanding cultural expression and esoterical wisdom. So I just kind of broke it down in that form and format. Expressing the 16 and esoterical wisdom. So I just kind of broke it down in that form and format.
Appreciate it.
And esoterical wisdom. So I just kind of broke it down in that form and format.
My bad. The Facebook popped up and I see Baba Todd in the building watching live.
My brother.
So yes, there's of course a whole lot more that we can discuss and go into, but I just wanted to introduce my audience to you and the tradition. Maybe we can bring you back in the future so we can specifically talk about the tradition of Ifa for those who, or Isheshe, for those who are interested in going into that route and trying to reconnect back to Africa in a real meaningful and practical way, outside of the academic, what we say in Africology, using Africa as a reference instead of a resource. So we want to use Africa as a resource, and this is just one way in which you can do that. So for those who are interested in wanting to learn more about the tradition and want to connect with you, besides the website itself, are you on any other social media platforms? How can they get in contact with you to learn more about what you're doing?
Well, I think my email is attached to the website. I am on a few other, I think I'm on Instagram. I don't, very seldom do I manage those things. I work with some wonderful people who we kind of work together on all that. Mostly contact me by email. I'm probably going to end up calling you on the phone. I'm old school, so we can still do a reading by Zoom, things like that. And the answer to your question, I would love to come back and talk more about just the tradition. What's traditional? How do we practice traditionally? And more so, what to some degree, some like getting people to understand that it's not a far-reaching concept to be a practitioner because you're not speaking the Yoruba language. That's an asset, but that is not anything that has to be, especially when Ifa and spirit knows your destiny and your true intention. And of course, the universal language of sincerity is always heard. And I think that would definitely help anyone who's looking to go down a path of African spirituality as far as the practicality side of it. I never give up study. I still read. Been reading a lot of things for the South. I'm planning to go down into South Africa soon. I definitely have some indigenous people I'm going to hook up with. So I want to have my stuff together and be able to reference a lot of what they give me. So to me, I think that's how we should move. Before you get into anything, get an understanding, get a reference before you find yourself back up in church again.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I do appreciate you as always. Hopefully, I won't take 10 years to contact you and things. But there's a lot to unpack, and I want to aid in people starting their journey and sending them to the right people. And you're one who I always think of when people want to understand the tradition of Ifa. So,
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
indeed,
And it's good seeing you, man. You haven't changed too much, man.
I'm trying. I'm getting the gray hairs are trying to come. It's like
Hey,
4.
let them roll. You see all this? I didn't have all this I didn't have all this 10 years. You see what y'all have done to me?
Indeed. Yeah, it's coming. So, but that's a good thing, in my semi-elderhood. So I just turned 42, if you can imagine that.
Oh, man, that's a sacred number, brother.
Indeed. But yeah, so thank all of you, of course, who are listening live. And then, of course, those of you who are catching the archives, make sure that you like the video. Make sure that you share the video. But most importantly, make sure you go to obafemi.org. The website is on the screen, and learn more about him and the O.I.D.S.I. Family. Matter of fact, speaking of, so, before you go, for those who, of course, are in a tradition and more so a part of the institute, you also host a conference biannually, and you have one coming up next year. So can
Yeah,
you
July 2022. You can see it on the website.
Yes. So do they have to be initiated? Do they have to at least have their left hand to join the conference?
No, absolutely not. It's open to the public. It's always been open to the public. It's not restricted to practitioners or members of the organization. We have a lot of people who bring their family members to give them or expose them to this side of African spirituality. More people just curious about who and what we were before we were put on ships and boats. And they're oftentimes are blown away. People often walk and say, I never knew this existed. So, it's open to the public. It's always been open to the public.
Alrighty. And for those of you who haven't joined the Patreon page or who have joined the Patreon page, the latest video and interview that y'all have exclusive viewing rights to at the moment is Dr. Modupe Oduyoye, who talks about the Yoruba, Hebrew, and Egyptian connections. He is a longtime elder, scholar, linguist, and theologian out of Nigeria, of the Yoruba people. And he's written a number of texts on that particular subject. So it's an honor to have him. And so you can check out that interview as well. And so with that being said, I won't hold you up anymore. I know you're busy, probably getting ready to get on a plane somewhere right now.
That's about this time next week. Right now, I have some clients waiting. So,
indeed. Well, again, thank you for coming on, and hope to have you back soon. And anything you want to say before we go to the listening audience?
hey man, first, definitely thank you for having me on. It was good seeing you again, and I'm definitely would be more than happy to come back. If there's anything I would say at this point to anyone, and that is get a reference to whatever it is you want to do, get an understanding. And most importantly, don't take any day for granted. What's going on in the world, you're not guaranteed to be here tomorrow. You got to live, you got to love, you got to laugh, you got to make something out of this and build, start building that legacy. Ashe.
Ashe. And with that said, I am out, and make sure y'all tune in tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern. It is an open dialogue. So whatever questions, whatever topic that y'all want to talk about tomorrow night, we will discuss it. And so bring your questions, bring your comments, and we will have a good time on tomorrow night. So with that being said, y'all have a safe day and a productive day, and I will see y'all next time. Peace.